Rome, March 44 BC. The capital of the world is in chaos. The most powerful dictator to have ever existed, Julius Caesar, has been assassinated in a conspiracy led by his own senators. In the cold streets of Rome, the future is uncertain. No one knows what will happen after his death, not even those who killed him. Amid the chaos, a young man of barely 18, unknown to most, receives news that will change his life forever. Octavius, Caesar's great-nephew and adopted son, becomes the sole heir to his wealth, his name, and his destiny. But Rome does not know who Octavius is. They do not know that this young man will become the one to transform a ruined republic into the greatest empire the world has ever known. Thus begins the story of Octavius Augustus, Rome's first and greatest emperor, a man who changed the course of history, who raised Rome from the ashes, but who was also responsible for betrayals, wars, and decisions that would alter the fate of thousands. A leader hailed as visionary and generous, but also condemned by others for his ruthless ambition. Today, we will delve into the life of Augustus and discover what made him the most complex and controversial leader Rome ever had. On March 15, 44 BC, Rome trembles with an event that would change the course of history, the death of Julius Caesar. In the Senate, under the cold light of torches, a group of senators conspires to assassinate the dictator who had achieved the impossible, turning Rome into a world power. The Roman Republic, which had defended shared power for centuries, now succumbed to the figure of an absolute leader, and many in the Senate could no longer tolerate it. But what remains when a man like Caesar falls? How can an entire city, built on the pillars of the Republic, find its way after losing the man who had brought it to power and seemed to have everything under control? Rome is plunged into chaos, caught in power struggles among the very men who had once been loyal to it. In this moment of total uncertainty, an unexpected figure emerges, Octavius, an 18-year-old great-nephew and adopted son of Caesar. No one in Rome knew who he was. Octavius was not a glorious general, nor an experienced politician like Mark Antony. He was neither a man of war nor fame. He was simply a teenager suddenly faced with a destiny greater than he had ever imagined, inheriting the empire of his adoptive father, Julius Caesar. The magnitude of his inheritance was not only financial. Octavius now possessed something more valuable than any treasure, the name of Caesar, the legacy of a man who had achieved absolute power. But Rome saw in him nothing more than an inexperienced youth, a man they considered an easy puppet to manipulate. Yet, what could Octavius do in the face of such uncertainty? Despite the pressure, Octavius decided to take control, not only of his great-uncle's wealth but of an uncertain destiny that no one could predict. While Rome struggled to understand what would happen next, Octavius made his way to the city, determined to claim what he considered rightfully his. But he did not inherit only power, he inherited a broken empire, where conflict was inevitable. And thus begins the story of a previously unknown young man who, through cunning, courage, and an incredible ability to manipulate circumstances, would become the most powerful man in the known world. Octavius would not only survive Rome's internal wars but would forever change the political structure of the world. Rome, 43 BC. Young Octavius has just received Julius Caesar's inheritance, but that is not enough for the world to accept him as a legitimate leader. In a city where betrayal is common currency, and with Mark Antony and the senators watching his rise with suspicion, Octavius knows that power is not inherited, it is seized. Despite the doubts of Roman nobility about his ability to govern, Octavius decides not to wait any longer. For him, Caesar's legacy is not just a financial inheritance but a tool of power that he must prove he deserves. But Roman politics are complex and treacherous. Mark Antony, Caesar's closest man and former ally, also seeks absolute control. The rivalry between Octavius and Antony becomes the main battleground for the future of Rome. The Roman Senate, fearful that power might fall into the hands of one man, devises a clever but dangerous plan. Octavius will be the public figure, the face of power, but not the ruler. Real power would remain in the hands of the senators. This move seemed safe for them, but they underestimated something vital. Octavius is not an easy man to control. Far from being the puppet many expected, Octavius begins to reshape alliances in his favor. With a touch of political cunning, he surrounds himself with loyal men and begins to use Caesar's name as a powerful weapon. But not only that. At barely 20 years old, Octavius begins forming his own army, commanding Roman legions, and proving he can win battles, something many did not expect. The first confrontations with Mark Antony put him at the center of the Roman political storm. After defeating Antony's forces in two crucial battles, Octavius returns to Rome with the glory of a victorious general. What seemed like luck is, in reality, the beginning of a flawless strategy. With the support of the Senate and the favor of citizens who saw him as a savior, Octavius not only gains legitimacy but begins to be recognized as a leader in his own right. However, rivals still remain in Rome. Antony is alive and still a threat, but Octavius has already begun weaving his web of alliances and is willing to eliminate anyone who stands in his way. In Roman politics, betrayal and survival become part of a dangerous game. This is how Octavian, the young man who arrived in Rome with nothing but his name, began his ascent to absolute power. But the path was not easy. In an environment where loyalty is fleeting and ambition is ruthless, Octavian was about to become the most powerful figure in the world. He was no longer just Caesar's adopted son. Now, he was the future of Rome. Rome, 43 BC, Octavian had already proven that he was not merely an heir. He was a shrewd, determined leader, willing to use every means at his disposal to secure his power. But despite his growing influence, he could not do it alone. He needed alliances, he needed to strengthen his position within the political arena of Rome. Thus, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate, a pact of 3 men to take control of Rome and eradicate their enemies. This triumvirate was not just a simple power-sharing agreement. It was a tactical alliance, but also a ruthless maneuver. In a country where loyalty is bought and lost quickly, the 3 men committed to eliminating anyone they deemed traitors. The Roman purge was about to begin. With a list of marked enemies, the triumvirate launched a series of executions and mass exiles. The 300 senators and opponents who could threaten their power were brutally eliminated. The Roman Republic, already weakened by years of conflict and corruption, was buried under the weight of this political revolution. But this purge did not only target senators. Mark Antony, eager to remove any threat, did not miss the opportunity to settle scores with Octavian. In the past, they had been allies, but Antony's lust for power began to push boundaries, and Octavian knew he could not trust him. Tensions between the two escalated, and civil war seemed increasingly inevitable. At the same time, Octavian did not remain idle. With control of the army, he began consolidating his power in Rome. He personally led military campaigns, confronting the last remnants of Republican resistance and proving that he was not only a political leader but also a military one. The war for Rome had become a matter of survival. And Octavian, though young, knew that his future depended on crushing his enemies. But the purge was not enough. Octavian's ambition was clear: he did not merely want to survive, he wanted to transform Rome into an empire. The Roman Republic, though still alive, was dying, and what remained was a titanic battle between Octavian and Mark Antony, where only one would emerge victorious. The fate of Rome was decided at Actium, 31 BC. Here, Octavian and Mark Antony faced not only each other's armies but also a struggle for the soul of the empire. After years of political maneuvering, alliances, and betrayals, the great final confrontation was about to erupt. Mark Antony, backed by his powerful army and the support of Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, faced Octavian, who now commanded Rome's strongest forces. The Battle of Actium was not merely a war of swords and spears. It was a clash of ideologies: the ancient Rome, represented by Mark Antony, seeking to restore past glories through an alliance with Egypt and Eastern ambitions, versus the imperial Rome of Octavian, which sought to consolidate power and shape a new order under his absolute control. Both leaders prepared for a decisive war, not only on land but also at sea, where the Roman fleets confronted each other directly. Despite Antony's promises to restore Rome's power under his own dynasty, Octavian could not allow his rival to retain control of Egypt's wealth and power, vital to maintaining Rome's supremacy. The Battle of Actium was not just about armies, it was about strategy. Octavian fought not only for military victory but also for Rome's legacy. During the battle, Mark Antony and Cleopatra, in a final effort to win, tried to leverage their superior fleet and Egypt's immense wealth, but Octavian's strategy was more calculated. Marcus Agrippa, Octavian's loyal general, proved crucial in the victory, defeating Antony's forces in a brilliant tactical engagement. The defeat of Mark Antony and Cleopatra was devastating. Both fled to Egypt, while Octavian celebrated a total victory. Egypt fell under Roman control, and Cleopatra, seeing her reign collapse, chose death over humiliation. Mark Antony, once Rome's second most powerful man, committed suicide, leaving Octavian as the sole ruler of Rome. With this victory, Octavian secured absolute control of the Roman Empire, eliminating his rivals once and for all and consolidating his power. The civil war had ended, and Rome was preparing to enter a new era under the empire. The Pax Romana was about to begin. With the victory at Actium, Rome was unified under a single leader. Octavian, the young heir of Julius Caesar, had achieved what many thought impossible: he had become the most powerful man in Rome. The empire was now in his hands, but his task had only just begun. Octavian now needed to solidify his power and reform Rome so that his rule would endure. Back in Rome, the situation is delicate. The Romans, accustomed to the Republic, are still not ready to accept the idea of an absolute ruler. Octavian knows this, and this is where his political intelligence comes into play. Instead of proclaiming himself dictator as his adoptive father did, Octavian adopts the title of princeps, meaning first among equals. This title, though full of symbolism, allows him to consolidate power without raising too much suspicion. In fact, Octavian goes to great lengths to avoid appearing as a dictator. For Rome, this is a great relief. In a city that has experienced so many internal struggles and civil wars, the reformer Octavian presents a moderate yet centralized power that promises a future of peace and prosperity. Octavian offers stability, something the Republic, torn apart by decades of conflict, could no longer guarantee. But in his mind, there is a larger vision. Rome needs to be transformed. Octavian does not merely aspire to be a successful ruler, he wants to be remembered as the man who shaped the Roman Empire. Thus begins his grand project of reforms. Restoring Rome to its greatness does not only mean winning battles, it also means building a new Rome, stronger and greater than ever. Under his leadership, Rome becomes a beacon of power and grandeur, transforming from a city of bricks into a metropolis of marble. The Pax Romana begins to take shape. Octavian invests in infrastructure, building new temples, aqueducts, and theaters. The city flourishes, and commerce thrives under a regime of peace. The Roman economy has never been stronger. At the same time, Octavian ensures that his image is universally recognized. In every corner of the empire, sculptures, busts, and coins bearing his likeness are distributed, creating an omnipresent figure. The cult of his personality spreads rapidly, and gradually Octavian becomes Augustus, the revered one. The month of August is named after him, a symbolic way of acknowledging his importance to Rome. Despite the appearances of a republican government, Octavian is the sole authority in power. He controls the army, politics, and the economy, and his authority has no rival. But the most impressive aspect is that he never resorts to open tyranny. He knows how to manipulate public perception to achieve a stable and effective government without being seen as a dictator. Over the years, Augustus establishes an imperial dynasty. His life is proof that ambition, strategy, and cunning can transform a young heir into the man who founded the Roman Empire and laid the foundations for 200 years of prosperity. After years of civil wars, betrayals, and an empire on the brink of collapse, Augustus faces his greatest challenge, consolidating peace in Rome. The dream of the Pax Romana, Roman peace, is not only a personal desire of Augustus, it is a vital necessity for the survival of the empire. In 27 BC, after eliminating his rivals and securing absolute control, Augustus implements a series of reforms that not only ensure internal peace but also completely reshape Rome's political, military, and social system. With this new order, Augustus aims not only to pacify Rome but also to expand its influence throughout the known world. The Pax Romana is not merely a temporary truce. It is a concept that defines an era of unprecedented stability and prosperity in which the Roman Empire reaches its peak. Augustus achieves peace not only through force but also through his shrewd diplomacy. The empire's borders stabilize, the Roman legions are organized more efficiently, and the provinces enjoy relative autonomy under Rome's supervision. The centralization of power, though absolute, is not marked by oppression but by intelligent governance that promotes unity and general well-being. But the Pax Romana is not only a period of calm at the borders. Rome flourishes internally, commerce and trade routes expand, infrastructure grows impressively with new aqueducts, bridges, roads, and public buildings, museums, theaters, and libraries that not only beautify the city but also strengthen Roman culture. Rome becomes the nerve center of the known world, the imperial capital hosting peoples from all regions, from the Iberian Peninsula to Asia Minor. Trade with the Far East grows by leaps and bounds, while in the Mediterranean, routes become safer than ever, allowing the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. Under Augustus, Rome becomes the economic, political, and cultural heart of the world. Moreover, social progress is equally significant. Although the Roman Republic had been famous for its inequalities, Augustus was determined to reform the social structure, promoting respect for Roman traditions while encouraging a new vision for the future. Laws were established to promote public morality and encourage marriage and parenthood within Roman values, attempting to rebuild a society weakened by decades of war. This allowed him to consolidate a solid foundation for the prosperity of Roman citizens. Despite the apparent stability, Augustus did not settle. He ensured that peace was maintained through his formidable army. During the early years of his reign, he implemented a successful military strategy, expanding the empire's borders and defending key regions such as Germania and the eastern provinces. Thanks to the Pax Romana, Romans could live without fear of invasions, which fostered a flourishing culture. In the artistic realm, Augustus promoted the creation of monuments, sculptures, and literary works that became symbols of the Roman Empire's greatness. Under his patronage, writers such as Virgil and Horace created works that would define Roman literature for generations to come. In the end, Augustus left Rome larger and more powerful than when he came to power. The Pax Romana, with its nearly 200 years of peace, became the enduring legacy that defined the Roman Empire as an unbeatable world power. Despite his often questioned political methods, Augustus ensured that Rome reached an era of unprecedented splendor, becoming the man who founded the empire and left an indelible mark on history. Rome, before Augustus, was a city marked by the scars of war, with deteriorated buildings and inadequate infrastructure. But Augustus, with his strategic vision, understood that the great Rome he wanted to leave behind had to be reflected not only in its military power but also in its image. As a great builder, Augustus committed to transforming the city into a symbol of Roman greatness. With Rome worn down by centuries of conflict, Augustus renewed the city with a modernizing vision that would make it one of the most impressive urban centers of the ancient world. His famous phrase, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble," reflects the magnitude of this process of renewal. The construction of temples, theaters, aqueducts, roads, bridges, and markets became a priority for the new emperor. Forging a modern infrastructure would be key to Rome's economic, cultural, and political development. One of his most ambitious projects was the reconstruction of the Roman Forum, the heart of Roman public life. Through a series of reforms, Augustus created a city that would not only be functional but also beautiful, where structures had both symbolic and practical purposes. Under his rule, 82 temples were restored or built in honor of the Roman gods. The Temple of Mars the Avenger, erected in the Forum to celebrate the victory at the battles of Philippi, is one of the most representative of his imperial dynasty. This construction was not only a religious manifestation but also a symbol of Augustus' power and legitimacy as the new divine man in Rome. Through these works, he sought to consolidate his power, legitimize his rule, and create a lasting memory in the city. The restoration of the aqueducts and the cleaning of the Tiber River were also measures that improved the quality of life in the city. Providing clean water to all of Rome was a top priority to ensure the population's well-being, making public health a foundation for future prosperity. He also began the construction of theaters and public libraries, fostering culture and the arts in a society that now enjoyed peace. One of the great achievements of his reign was the creation of a fire brigade, a necessity for a rapidly growing city facing the risk of fires, especially in the heart of Rome, where wooden structures were common. Augustus, with a practical and forward-thinking vision, considered not only Rome's aesthetic beauty but also its effective functioning. Augustus was not only a military and political leader but also a great urban planner. His urban reforms were not only necessary for peace and stability but also to consolidate the idea that Rome was the epicenter of civilization. His focus on architectural development cemented an image of Rome as a city that not only dominated the world but did so with majesty. Augustus' great work thus stands as the city of the future for 1st century BC Rome, and his architectural legacy survives to this day. Many of the monuments Augustus built or restored endured, influencing Rome's urban development for centuries and forming the foundation of what we now know as the Eternal City. Rome, 14 AD, Augustus, the man who transformed Rome from a war-torn republic into a prosperous and peaceful empire, has reached the end of his life. At 76 years old, his health has begun to decline, and death is inevitably approaching. However, although his body may be weary, his legacy remains more alive than ever. With Rome in the hands of his stepson Tiberius, the future of the empire seems secure, but Augustus knows that his departure will mark the end of an era. In his final days, he calls his family and closest friends. In the calm of his chamber, surrounded by those he left in power, Augustus reflects on his life. With a tone of resignation and satisfaction, he bids farewell to his legacy, asking to be applauded and celebrated as the man who saved Rome and turned it into the greatest empire in the world. "Since I have more than fulfilled my part, applaud me all," he said, a final gesture of humility reflecting his deep sense of duty. On August 19, 14 AD, Augustus peacefully passed away in his villa at Nola, accompanied by his wife Livia. Although he had spent years facing betrayals and challenges, his death was not accompanied by the violence that marked the fates of many Roman rulers. In his final moments, Augustus ensured that his legacy would be immortal. Tiberius, his stepson, would succeed him, beginning a new imperial dynasty that would remain in power for generations. Rome not only mourned the death of its emperor but also celebrated his life, for Augustus had achieved what few men in history have, the transformation of an empire and the creation of a legacy that would endure for centuries. In recognition of his greatness, Augustus was deified after his death, and his image became an eternal symbol of power and stability. The emperor who founded the Roman Empire and made Rome the capital of a prosperous and peaceful world left an indelible mark. His divinized figure was elevated to the status of a Roman god, which not only immortalized him but also served as a model for the emperors who followed. In the decades following his death, Rome would continue to flourish under the rule of his successors, but the peace and stability he established would never be seen in the same light again. Although his reign was marked by challenges and difficult decisions, it was ultimately his vision that allowed Rome to become the center of a global empire and one of the greatest empires in history.